On the morning of February 10, 1862, a cold mist clung to the waters of North Carolina's Pasquotank River. The river flowed quietly past Elizabeth City, a modest but strategically vital town whose fate was about to be decided not by armies on land, but by warships slipping through narrow channels and shallow sounds. What unfolded here would be brief, violent, and decisive, yet largely forgotten outside Civil War history circles. Elizabeth City occupied a critical position in the Confederate defensive network. The Pasquotank River fed directly into Albemarle Sound, which in turn connected to a series of inland waterways and canals, including the Dismal Swamp Canal and the Albemarle and Chesapeake Canal. These routes allowed supplies, food, and material to move between Virginia and eastern North Carolina while avoiding Union blockades along the coast. For the Confederacy, control of these waters meant survival. With the Union, capturing them meant tightening the noose. By early 1862, Union strategy along the Atlantic coast was accelerating. The North Atlantic blockading squadron had already scored a major victory with the capture of Roanoke Island just days earlier. That success opened the door to deeper penetration into Confederate-controlled waters. With Roanoke Island fallen, the Union Navy turned its attention north, toward Elizabeth City, knowing that any remaining Confederate naval resistance in the Albemarle region had to be eliminated. Standing in their way was a small and underpowered Confederate force known, often mockingly, as the Mosquito Fleet, commanded by Flag Officer William F. Lynch. This flotilla consisted of hastily converted civilian vessels, steamers, tugs, and schooners pressed into naval service. They were lightly armed, poorly supplied, and dramatically outmatched by Union gunboats, but they were all the Confederacy had to defend the Sound. The flagship of this fleet was the CSS Sea Bird, a sidewheel steamer that carried Lynch himself. Alongside her were vessels like the CSS Black Warrior, the CSS Fanny, and several smaller craft. Their crews knew the waters well, but familiarity could not compensate for inferior firepower. Still, their mission was clear: delay the Union advance for as long as possible and protect the vital waterways beyond Elizabeth City. Opposing them was a formidable Union force of 13 gunboats under the command of Commander Stephen C. Rowan. These ships were larger, better armed, and crewed by seasoned sailors who had already tasted victory at Roanoke Island. Confidence ran high as the Union squadron advanced up the Pasquotank River in the early morning hours. The Confederates anchored their vessels near Cobb's Point, hoping to use a small four-gun shore battery to support them, but the position was weak, and supplies were running dangerously low. When the Union ships appeared, moving steadily upriver, there was little doubt about how the confrontation would unfold. The battle began shortly after dawn. Union gunboats ignored the ineffective shore battery and pressed directly toward the Confederate flotilla. Cannon fire erupted across the river, echoing through the surrounding marshlands. The Mosquito Fleet attempted to maneuver, but the narrow river and superior Union numbers left little room for escape. One by one, Confederate ships were overwhelmed. The CSS Black Warrior took heavy fire and was soon abandoned by her crew, who set her ablaze rather than allow capture. The CSS Fanny was run aground and deliberately burned. The fight briefly turned savage when Union sailors boarded the CSS Ellis, engaging in close hand-to-hand combat before seizing control of the vessel. The most dramatic moment came when the Union gunboat USS Commodore Perry rammed the Confederate flagship, CSS Sea Bird. The impact was devastating. The Sea Bird was quickly disabled and sank beneath the waters of the Pasquotank, taking with her the last hope of coordinated Confederate naval resistance in the region. A few Confederate vessels attempted to flee. The CSS Beaufort and the CSS Appomattox raced toward the Dismal Swamp Canal, hoping its narrow passage would provide refuge. Beaufort escaped, but Appomattox was not so fortunate. Unable to pass through the canal's locks, her crew destroyed the ship to prevent capture. By mid-morning, the battle was over. The Mosquito Fleet had been annihilated. Union losses were minimal. Confederate resistance on the water had collapsed entirely. With no fleet left to defend it, Elizabeth City lay exposed. Confederate troops retreating after the disaster at Roanoke Island set fire to parts of the town under orders from Brigadier General Henry A. Wise. Smoke rose above the riverbanks as buildings burned. But Union sailors moved quickly upon arrival, extinguishing fires and preventing widespread destruction. The Union victory at Elizabeth City secured control of Albemarle Sound and severed a critical Confederate supply network. From that moment forward, eastern North Carolina became increasingly vulnerable to Union operations. Though small in scale, the battle had outsized strategic consequences, reinforcing Union naval dominance and accelerating the collapse of Confederate defenses along the coast. Today, the Battle of Elizabeth City rarely appears in textbooks, overshadowed by larger and bloodier engagements, yet its impact remains preserved in quiet ways, through museum relics recovered from the river, historic markers along Civil War trails, and the enduring story of a naval clash that changed the balance of power in the Carolina Sounds. If you enjoyed uncovering this forgotten moment in Civil War history, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the battles that shaped America. Let us know in the comments which overlooked battle or campaign you'd like to explore next. And Dan T, forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a story from the past that still echoes today.